Hey, what is going on, guys? This is Beanie, and today, well, this is my third video of the day, but today we're going to be doing, something that people have been asking for a while, and that is part 2 of my pitching tutorial. I put out a, kind of a beginner's tutorial on pitching, about a month ago. And people were like, when's part 2 coming out? When's part 2 coming out? Well, it's taking me a while to get around to it, and I've actually kind of forgotten a little bit of what I've talked about in that first video, so there may be a little bit of repetitiveness, but this video is going to be more focused on situational pitching and really just kind of how to approach each situation that you might get into. It's not going to be so much like, you know, okay, this is what you do when there's a runner on first and second with one out or something like that. It's going to be more just like a general idea of how you want to pitch in general, and just to get you to start thinking more about how to approach each individual situation, because obviously it would be too much to just go through and you know, every possible situation. So I'm going to kind of leave that to you, but I am going to give you just kind of a broad idea of how you want to go about doing things when you are pitching. Okay, and the first thing I want to talk about is defensive shifts, and my number one tip on this is not like that. This is in no particular order, but my number one tip is use defensive shifts to your advantage. And I don't think, yeah, I can't do anything with defensive shifts in the pitching practice mode or whatever, which is kind of unfortunate. I don't like that. But, you know, really go through before every game starts, or you may want to do it on individual batters. That's really up to you. But just go through and look at your opponents, look at their hitters' spray chart, and see if they're really pull heavy, they're really push heavy. You know, and just look at that. And if they're a power hitter, you may want to put your outfield back. You know, you may want to if they're a speedy guy, you may want to bring your infield, you know, in a bunt defense. That's not as big of a problem this year, but if they're a really pull heavy guy, you may want to go into an extreme shift. If they're a little bit pull heavy, but not like extremely, you may just want to do like a basic shift, you know, just shift a little bit to the right and not do like the extreme shift. So just keep that in mind, you know, whenever you're facing your opponent, that you can take away a lot of outs if you use defensive shifts to your advantage. Okay, and the second tip right here is something that I think is pretty obvious, but I never see like hardly anybody ever do it, and that's just don't be afraid of issuing intentional bases on balls. Or intentional walks. Like, don't be afraid of giving your opponent a base in certain situations. For example, if you know you're in an inning and you have one out and your opponent hits a double, so he has a runner on second, nobody out, and he has his best hitter. He has 99 George Brett coming up, but after George Brett, he has I don't know, let's say the 86 Alcides Escobar. I don't know why somebody would construct their lineup that way, but what they've done is they virtually left that George Brett with no protection behind him. And because of that, it's really easy to just say, hey, I'm going to walk this guy and pitch to Alcides, because I'm 1,000 times more confident versus Alcides than I am George Brett. So don't be afraid of giving that extra base. And another situation where I could see it arising is if you know, if you have 2 outs and that George Brett is coming up or somebody like that. I know I gave this example in my Battle Royale tutorial, but you know, if you have 2 outs and George Brett's coming up, and then he has somebody that you're marginally more confident against coming up behind him, don't be afraid to walk him if you honestly feel like if you're confident you can get that next guy out. Now, you know, every now and then it will backfire, and you will maybe give up an extra run here or there because of that. But I think in the long term, it's going to work out to where you end up giving up less runs, because you know when to pitch to certain guys, but you know when to kind of avoid those guys. And I don't know if this is really like the third tip. This might be tip number 2A or 2B or whatever. But sometimes instead of issuing an intentional walk, instead of just giving that base away, what you may want to do is you may want to pitch around that guy. Maybe pitch him, not just go ahead and do like the intentional walk thing, but you may just want to throw him 4 balls in a row. And situations where you might want to do this is whenever your opponent has a really quick bat, but they're not that disciplined. They swing at a lot, and you feel like you may have a chance of getting a strikeout if you just throw like 3 or 4 balls in a row. And since you were gonna issue an intentional walk in the first place, you don't feel that you're not scared to give up. Sorry, I can't talk right now. You're not scared to give up that walk because that's what you were going to do anyway. You just have that added bonus of having at least a chance of striking that guy out. The only downside to this is sometimes it can be kind of easy to hang a pitch. If you miss your interface by a little bit and instead of a low changeup in the dirt, you kind of hang it and it comes over the plate and they hit it for a home run. But if you're really good with your interface and you're confident that, you can throw those balls and everything, that can also be a good strategy to kind of pitching around guys and avoiding hitters, while at the same time giving yourself a chance to let your opponent beat themselves and maybe get a strikeout or 2 out of it every now and then. That kind of leads me into my third tip, which is be able to judge what type of hitter your opponent is. And, it's a little bit more intrinsic than this, but generally there are 4 types of hitters in this game. There are hitters that have no plate discipline and slow bats. This is your worst type of hitter. These are the guys that really, can't get out of like the lowest divisions in this game. They're the guys that swing at everything, and you can throw them 95-mile-an-hour fastball after 95-mile-an-hour fastball, and they'll never be able to catch up with it. These are guys that absolutely suck, and I say that like as respectfully as I can, but they've got a lot to work on in their game. The second type of hitter is someone who has a quick bat but no discipline, and these guys are marginally better than the slow bat guys, but they can still be taken advantage of because they don't know how to lay off of a pitch. At least they don't know how to do it regularly enough to be able to hit effectively. The third type of hitter is a guy that has a slow bat, but he is disciplined at the plate. And this is where a lot of people end up falling into. They fall into this category. They just can't really catch up to a good fastball, but they have plate discipline, and they're a little bit better than the first 2 types, and they're a little bit tougher to pitch to, but you can't exploit those guys by just throwing a lot of fastballs, and unless they are good enough to just kind of disregard the off-speed stuff and just focus on the fastball to speed their bat up a little bit, you can take advantage of them if they don't know how to do that. Then the final type of player is the player that has the quick bat and he is extremely disciplined at the plate. These are the guys that are going to give you the toughest time, and they're the toughest guys to really kind of figure out how to pitch to. And in all honesty, there aren't a lot of tips for pitching to these guys, except for just kind of stay mix your pitches really well. Don't always throw strikes. Give them a ball or 2 here or there to try to make them lay off of pitches. Have a lot of variety in the way that you approach them. But all in all, they're probably going to score some runs off of you because they are among the best hitters in the game. Okay, and now the fourth tip that I want to talk about, and this is really just it's not like that. There are a bunch of sub tips in this overall tip, and it's just think about the situation that you have. If you have a runner on first with 1 out, obviously you're going for either a double play or maybe a strikeout or something. Those would be the ideal outcomes, the double play being the ultimate outcome in that situation. Well, there are a few ways that you can go about generating ground balls, but the first tip whenever talking about, trying to get more ground balls is, the first tip is to avoid four-seam fastballs. Four-seam fastballs, in my experience, are the easiest pitch to elevate for a player that knows what they're doing. That they're pretty darn easy to kind of square up, hit line drives, hit deep fly balls, maybe even hit home runs. They're not very difficult to avoid double plays on. So, if at all possible, avoid throwing four seams in situations like that. Unless you're throwing it for a ball. Throwing four seams for a ball can work sometimes because even if they don't swing at it, it sets up some other stuff that we're going to talk about later. But two of the best pitches, and really it's just one, but a couple of the best pitches to really look for when trying to generate ground balls and get those double plays and stuff like that. Obviously, one is the sinker. But opposed to conventional wisdom, you don't always want to keep the sinkers low in the zone. Throwing a high and inside sinker every now and then is a good way to get a guy to roll over on one, because they'll jam their PCI way up there, and and then they'll roll over that ball and they'll hit it for a weak ground ball to like the second baseman or something like that. So it's not always best to keep your pitches down. Just kind of diversify those sinkers, and just try to keep your opponent guessing when throwing that pitch. And if your pitcher doesn't have a sinker, there's a good chance that he has a two-seam. And while I don't think the two-seam is as good as a sinker because it has more horizontal movement than vertical movement, it still has enough movement on it that it can cause your opponent to roll over. Two seams, in my experience, in 2017 are a little bit better than they have been in years past. Two seams were largely ineffective last year and the year before that, and it was all about the sinker. But this year, two seams have a little bit more of an effect. So yeah, if they don't have a sinker, you can rely on that two seam, just probably not as much as the sinker. And another really good way to get opponents to roll over on pitches, to hit ground balls and stuff like that, is to set them up with hard fastballs outside the zone, whether that be a sinker, whether that be a two-seam, and then give them some diverse off-speed pitches. Give them, if you're a righty on righty, give them that slow outside changeup, or that slow 12-6 that kind of falls out of the zone a little bit. Maybe if you're righty on righty again, give them that slider, break into the outside corner of the plate that so many people roll over on. Just I guess the overarching message of this is just think about what you've done in the past and what's worked on hitters to get them to roll over balls and generate ground balls, and whatever's worked for you, maybe go back to that and see if it'll work on your current opponent. And oftentimes you'll see that, difficulties in hitting in this game, a lot of people's problems are the same. And, every hitter is a little bit different. See, right there, that was a good example of a sinker. Oh, shit, I threw it to third. I'm an idiot. But a lot of people's problems are the same, and every hitter is different, but a lot of people have the same sorts of problems. Like, they have problems pulling down on high and inside fastballs. They have problem hitting the low and away changeup. They have all sorts of problems, and maybe even righty on righty. Throw this changeup on the outside corner. A lot of people tend to roll over on that. See, just like that. It's a nice little double play ball, even though that guy's fast as shit. But yeah, so guys, that's going to do it for this video. I guess the overall message is just really think about your situation and don't come at the game so black and white. I know a lot of people, they just don't want to spend too much time in their pause menu or whatever. But don't be afraid to use those shifts. Don't be afraid to, maybe, think outside the box whenever you're pitching. This is not a 100% accurate baseball simulation, so maybe you don't want to throw sinkers low all the time. Maybe a good high sinker is good for the soul every now and then. So yeah, guys, just think about all those things, and I will see y'all tomorrow with some more content. I'm going to put out another countdown. I'm going to be counting down the top 10 second basemen tomorrow, and I've got a head-to-head gameplay, head-to-head season ranked seasons gameplay that all I've got to do is edit up, and that will be out tomorrow. And yeah, like, subscribe, retweet this video for a chance at autographed Eric Hosmer jersey. And tell your friends, man. Tell your friends about old Beanie Antics, trying to grow the channel here. I would really appreciate it, guys. But with all that being said, I will see y'all later. Peace!